Kupina kuphi emakhaya emadolobheni sakumukela mbukele, and welcome to your weekly dose of consumer affairs issues where we advise you on matters that directly affect your pocket. Sathemba ke ukuthi emalungelo akho so wati kangcono. Khumbula ke mbukele ukuthi nawe ungaba ingcenye yetinkulumo tethu ke ngeke usishayela licingo noma ke usithinze ke ku-email noma ke ku-Facebook na ku-Twitter. Well, the details are on your screens right now. Kazi leli Yilungelo Lakho, it's your right. Siyanimukela. Now, did you know that if you've got a debt that is older than 3 years and has never been pursued by the service provider during this period, you may not be liable to repay that debt? Well, this old debt is known as a prescribed debt, which by law should be written off. However, some debt collectors may take advantage of the ignorance of consumers and offer them discounts on the prescribed debts. Now, if consumers respond positively to this offer, this may revive the old debt. Nyalo-ke kusifundisa kabanti ke ngemalungelo ethu mayelana nema-prescribed debts asesimukele ke Salem Gyafta yena ke ubuya e-credit ombuds kanye ke natekani mabasa lovela ke u-counsel for debt collectors. Lady and gentlemen, and a warm welcome to the show. Sanmukele.
Thank you for having us.
Now, I'm going to start with you. First of all, what is prescribed debt? Tell us in detail.
All right. Uma sikhuluma nge-prescribed debt, we talk about a debt that the consumer, so a consumer opened an account, and then at some point, for whatever reason, they stop paying. So they default on the account. Uma kundlule u-3 years, the credit provider has not pursued the debt in terms of collecting. They have not issued summons, which means that they have not taken legal action against the consumer. And the consumer has also not acknowledged the debt, be it in writing, be it verbally. The debt then prescribes. So this is over a period of 3 years. So uma kune silence nje kuthe cwaka asikhulumisani no credit provider awuzange wenza payment wena azange bathathe legal action and azange usivume isikweletu, the debt then prescribes by law. Umthetho uyavuma ukuthi you are now no longer liable for the debt.
Okay, asasi, before we get deeper to the conversation, asasikhulume ngama reasons ukuthi yini letizathu letenda ukuthi credit provider ingamhambeli or ingamkhulumisi i-consumer.
Look, there can be many reasons. You know, it's difficult to sit here ukulume on behalf of a credit provider. But sometimes, uthola ukuthi ama-credit providers, they prioritize a collection. You know, abanye abantu ngeke bakhona ukukhokhela vele. Uyabona ukuthi simo lana noma ngiyazama kakhulu ngeke umuntu akhona ukuthi akhokhele, whereas on the other side uyabona ukuthi lana if I collect there is a high possibility yokuthi umuntu akhona ukuthi asikhokhele lesi sikweletu. So there are many reasons which the credit providers may be able to respond, and also they've got their internal processes in terms of, again, prioritizing the collection process. But it does get to a point where sekudlula this 3 years and there has been silence between umthengisi nomthengi, and as a result, after iskhathi, they then come back and say, go uyasikhumbula lesa sikweletu.
Now, Tekani, let me bring you into this conversation. When does a debt become prescribed? At what point?
Actually, prescription, it's in two forms. There's prescription in terms of the Prescription Act 68 of 1969, and then it categorically states what kinds of accounts and what period it prescribes. For an example, it's a mortgage bond. If it's a credit, a normal credit is 3 years. Mortgage bond rates debt to the state, or judgment, it will be 30 years. So there is also prescription in terms of the National Credit Act, section 126B. 126B indicates to you that all credits obtained in terms of that act, specifically that act. For an example, if it's a loan or clothing account, and then if it's 3 years no collection, then you are not allowed to collect it. If you collect it as a credit provider or as a debt collector, it will be a misconduct in terms of the regulations of the National Credit Act. So National Credit Regulator will have to deal with you.
So is the 3-year period fixed? I mean, does that include home loans, like longer term loans such as home loans, for instance?
Home loan is not 3 years. home loan is not 3 years, as I indicated that there's a prescription act which indicate mortgage bond will not be 3 years. It indicates specifically, if I stand to be corrected, it's 30 years.
Yes.
It's 30 years for mortgage bond. But for the debts like motor vehicle finance, it's 3 years. For clothing account, personal loans, credit cards, it's 3 years. And then if it's a debt, for an example, a service which was given to you, let's say it's a doctor, you visited a doctor, then it is 3 years. However, there are other steps which have to be followed. That is a problem which we have currently. There are steps to be followed because there you have to follow what the Prescription Act says.
Yeah.
But if it's a credit agreement, let's say you went to the bank, then you have to follow what the National Credit Act says.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, Salam, if the address yami ngingakayishinji throughout the 3-year period, or if ngishintshile, kuyawenza umehluko lokho?
Kuyawenza umehluko. Remember, uma sikhuluma nge-prescription of isikoloto, whereby mina as a consumer can now say, cha, this debt has prescribed, therefore, angeke uzokoleka. It would mean that ama contact details azange change, but a credit provider azange enza ama steps to collect on the debt or to take legal actions against mina. So sometimes uthola ukuthi u consumer a change address or a change contact details. So a credit provider tries to contact a consumer in, I'm contacted from the last known contact details or address. Angamtholi. That doesn't mean ukuthi that debt has prescribed, because they have made means to collect on the debt. Nguwe ubungatholakala. Because cabanga, if that was the case, sonke phela besizo change ama contacts, siwabalekela amatyala. But it simply means that a credit provider has tried, but when you have changed a contact details. And also, remember what this law is trying to do. Imagine now, uneskweleti wena year 2000, you default in year 2000, a credit provider atula tikwaka, anga contact, and then bayaqhamuka 2017, 7 years later. Imagine the interest, imagine the fees, the administrative fees, the collection fees, and everything pertaining to that. Uzofika so hleli neskweletu esingaka. So they're trying to curb that, ukuthi collect within a reasonable time frame.
Okay. All right. Does that include student loans, such as NSFAS loans, for instance?
I'll hand this over to the legal guru here next to me.
You see, the national NSFAS differs because that one is a legislated loan. It has its own law. It will tell you as to when it's collected. For an example, I get complaints from people who had been financed by NSFAS and say, look, this debt had prescribed. But you go to the National Student Financial Aid Act, Scheme Aid Act, you look at it, it tells you that when you start working, you can stay 10 years, but when you start working, is then that prescription will kick in. But you haven't yet worked for the past 10 years, so you cannot claim prescription. So that is why in the Prescription Act, it says the other laws of Parliament indicate so. So meaning that this act specifically was designed for NSFAS.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right. Now, basho-ke bathi-ke let sleeping dogs lie. Nawe-ke basopa ungativusi tikweleti uma tilele mbukeli. Siyabuya khona manje emva kwaleli khefu. Siyabuya khona nyalo. Don't go away. So our participating lines are now open. Sishayele ubeke umbono noma ke umbuto wakho. Tikhona ke Thambile Tetfu from the Credit Ombuds as well as the Council for Debt Collectors Salim Tyafsha and Tekani Mabasa respectively. And kulelo hlangothi ke asesimukele Thato ulapha eThembisa. Sakumukele ehlelweni sawubona.
Yebo.
Ninjani baba?
Ngiyaphila njani bhuti?
Siyaphila. Khuluma namba.
Yebo, ngibekuzile ukuthi for me to things over the cover on my debt, what should I do? Maybe.
Come again? I didn't quite get your question.
Ukuthi uma ngifuna ukucover like ama-tax wami enginawo, what yini ama-steps amele ngiwathathe like?
All right, Tatu, siyabonga kakhulu kusishayela. Tatu is basically asking if he wants to cover all his debts, what should he do? What steps should he follow?
Cover in terms of paying them off, or cover in terms of, you know, there's something called credit life cover, whereby you would then have that cover should you get retrenched maybe, and then it pays off your debt. So I'm just going to answer it from a broad perspective. Okay. You know, sometimes people say, and I'm struggling, you know, to prioritize my debt, or I'm actually drowning in debt. There are options available from for the consumers. The NCR has introduced debt counseling, for example, where a debt counselor would then go and negotiate on your behalf, kuma credit providers, for a lesser installment amount, whereby there's a court order in place. Instead of paying this much, we are now reducing our installments for you so that now you can breathe. So there is that option. Consumers can also go and speak to the credit providers to say, ngicela ningehlisele ama installments because I'm struggling. You know, on the other side as well, there is something called a credit life cover or credit life insurance, which we actually advise consumers to take. Some credit agreements do come with it. Ukuthi should you lose your job, be it being retrenched, it would cover you maybe 6 months, maybe 12 months, so that you don't find yourself in a situation whereby you are now blacklisted kuma credit bureaus because because there's been a financial change elifini yakho. So I'm hoping that I cover what he's trying to ask.
Okay, and having said that, I'm actually glad he raised that question. Yini umehluko emkhatsini kwe prescribed debt and a debt that is written off totally?
All right. Isikweletu that's prescribed, it means that a credit provider has not taken the necessary steps to collect. Therefore, ngokomthetho, you are not liable. I do want to point out, though, that our consumers, they do interrupt a prescription, even after the 3 years. You know, when we're talking these credit agreements, whereby uzothola ucingo from maybe the company or a collection company that would say, and then a consumer at, oh yeah, ngiyakumbula, or they would say things like, we're offering you a discount or make a minimum payment, maybe 50 rand, and then
so that prescribed debt falls away.
It falls away. So sivusile lesi sikweletu ekufeni, basically. You know, so consumers need to be very aware of that. Yes, 3 years angadlula, but if you make payment towards that debt, or if you acknowledge that debt, then you so iphazamisile ke prescription, you are now liable. Kumele ukuthi usele uqhubeka ukubhadala. So that's the prescribed debt. A debt that's written off, and we see that a lot in the credit bureaus, where a consumer is now listed in the credit bureau and the listing is bad debt written off. They use that term to balance their books because they need to report on the debt that they have given out and what has happened. It does not mean you are not liable when as a consumer. You are still liable. You are still going to hear from our friends, the debt collectors.
What if the creditor takes legal action against the consumer? What happens there?
Okay, I just want, before
Yeah, sure.
I answer that one, I just want to clear something there. You see, with the written off is an accounting word which they use. Normally when they sell this debt, they say written off. You'll get a call from somebody else saying, now I own the debt. Then we go on. Prescription. Prescription is in two formats, as I indicated, in terms of the National Credit Act and in terms of the Prescription Act. Meaning that if it's a debt in terms of the National Credit Act, even if the credit provider collects it, it's still wrong because the Act says you cannot collect or sell You cannot collect or sell a prescribed debt. So if it happens, you concede that you can pay that debt. It is still wrong. If you find yourself that you're paying a debt which was older than 3 years, you're contacted after 3 years, then it is wrong for a credit provider to do so. Then there's a prescription in terms of the Prescription Act. Then if it happens, like service rendered to you, then you concede to pay. In terms of the law, if you concede to pay, then you waive away your right to raise a special plea of prescription.
Okay. Right. Now, if I happen to reside outside South Africa, let's go to Lanzela. Would the debt follow me?
Yes, currently we have debt collectors who contact people who went outside South Africa to pay the debt in South Africa.
Okay. Now, during the ad break, we were discussing about the fact that consumers or people just don't read their contracts. Or maybe they may be signing it under duress, whatever the reason is, but they just don't read the contracts. So is there a provision of a prescribed debt in a credit contract, for instance?
In any contract, if you enter into an agreement, let's take for credit agreement, there is no provision to indicate that this debt will prescribe so and so. It is your right as a consumer to know this. You have to know this so that when you get in trouble, you know the institutions which will help you.
All right. Do you have a debt and you don't know whether it's prescribed or not? Well, I guess waiting to help you. We'll be right back after this. And after the break, we'll be taking your Facebook messages. This is your right. Yilungelo Lakho. Siyabuya khona nyalo. It's your right. You can call us or share your thoughts on our social media platforms, and our guests are here to help you. And speaking of social media, let's take a look at the Facebook messages. Klaus Kali Matsapane would say, yes, I agree, but why the lawyers always force us to pay old debt of more than 3 years? Young Fifi says, if you are loyal, you need to pay it even if it's after 3 years to show that you are trusted, because one day you will need help from that same person and he or she won't help you again because you are no longer trusted to him or her, so you need to pay that money. And Andile Utsi, if you die without paying debt, what will happen to your family? Do they continue paying the debts of someone else if the person dies? Good question. I'm going to throw it to both of you.
Okay, thank you for that question. Normally, as my colleague indicated before, people should take, even the National Credit Act, prescribe that you can have life insurance cover for that specific debt. So people should take it, it assists. So if there's no such taken, but these days I don't think there's a credit provider who will take that risk to give you a debt without that policy. However, if it happens, you dies, there's no policy, nothing, they will come after your estate. Your estate is responsible to pay for the debt.
Oh, okay.
If you have an estate. But if your estate is insolvent, then there's nothing they lose.
There's nothing they can do.
Yes.
Okay. Asasiye Davidton, kuna Filmon. Siyakumela ehlelweni film, sawubona?
Siyabona baba njani?
Siyaphila kunjani baba?
Siyaphila.
Awukhuluma nathi.
Ngikubuza mina.
Yeah.
Yeah, ngicela ukubuza baba. Mangithi bengisebenza then ngine personal loan. Then ngibhadala kahle. Then from there ngaphelelwa umsebenzi. Then ngomva ngiphelelwa umsebenzi, ngaphinda ngathola umsebenzi temporary ngaqhubeka ngikuyibhadala. Then waphela lo msebenzi lo within 6 months. So mina about 1 year 6 months manje ngathola umsebenzi. Then ngiyabakoleka ingaba lapho ngancedwa kanjani?
All right, Philemon sabona khulu kusishayela. How do you respond to that?
Okokuqala uPhilemon kumele akhulumisane no credit provider.
Okay.
Achaze isimo sakhe. Okwesibili siyesithi kuma consumers uma uphelelwe ngumsebenzi hamba uye ku credit provider ufuna ukuchaziselwa khona lapho ukuthi indaba ze credit life cover zisebenza kanjani. Because sometimes uthola ukuthi iyacover for 6 months while ungekabe namsebenzi. And then if kukuthi, so it all depends, ziyahlukana. Sometimes uthola ukuthi if kundlulile le 6 months awukawutholi futhi umsebenzi uyahamba uyokwenza enye affidavit futhi ethi angakasebenzi nansi retrenchment letter yam. So into ebalekile ukuthi uhlale nje ukhulumisana no credit provider. Kwenzela credit provider angacabanga ukuthi uyasibaleka lesi sikweletu.
Okay.
Yes.
So can I get another loan after the prescribed debt?
Yes, you can. If all those processes had been followed that this debt had prescribed, then you can get a loan. You cannot be discriminated that as a credit provider, I failed to collect the debt. And furthermore to that, people should know that what happens is, if it's not collected for 3 years, a credit provider or a debt collector or an attorney for that matter can list you at a credit bureau for that debt after you have raised the prescription as a defense. You have to raise it. Let's say, for an example, you're checking at a credit bureau. You know, responsible consumers have to do that. Yearly, or in 6 months, you can check for a credit profile. It's free of charge.
Once every 12 months, it's
yes,
free.
How long then does it stay on my credit record?
Once every.
How long does the prescribed debt stay?
It will stay there until you dispute it. If you find that from your profile, you have a right to challenge it at the credit bureau. It's free of charge. You have to indicate to the specific credit bureau and say, look, this debt to me had prescribed, meaning that no one contacted you in this 3 year. So if no one had contacted you, then you launch that dispute. The credit bureau will have to contact that credit provider or the debt collector or the attorney to say, here there's a dispute of this listing. Do you have any proof contrary to what the consumer is saying? If they don't furnish that proof within its 20 working days, then the credit bureau will have to remove that from your credit profile. Then you are clean. And then if they furnish a proof that this did not prescribe, then it stays there in your credit profile. And another route, it means that now the attorney, credit provider, or debt collector will have to take you to court. Then the court will have to confirm whether it had prescribed or not.
Okay. And just to add on what my colleague is saying, remember, go credit bureau, kunama different types of listings, right? Whereby you find that a default listing stays for 1 year and a judgment listing stays for 5 years. That listing means that they've taken you to court. And then there's something else called an account history, which is allowed to run for 5 years. An account history means that I have this account that's active, and so it's running. So every month you make a payment, this month Usalem has paid, this month Usalem has skipped a payment, this month Usalem has paid late, right? Now, consumers might find, I've contacted the credit bureau. I find that there is a negative listing, they call it a black listing, reflecting in my credit profile, be it a default that stays for 1 year, be it a judgment that stays for 5 years. And they then can dispute to say, I see that even though the last time I heard from the credit provider was over 3 years ago, but I see it now listed in the credit bureau, and it's going to reflect for a year if it's a default. They then follow the process that he's just spoken about of lodging a dispute free of charge with the credit bureau that is involved, that has the listing. And therefore, the credit bureau, the onus is then on the credit provider to prove otherwise. If they cannot prove otherwise, that information is then removed from your credit profile before the 1 year period lapses. So that's called then a dispute process. I'm just expanding on what you're saying, yeah.
All right. Asasambe lapha eMlazi kuna Lindiwe. Sawubona Lindiwe?
Yebo, sawubona mzwana Ngcongwana njani?
Siyaphila ukhulu maka.
Yebo.
Khuluma nathi ma.
Nginenkinga lana mina ngo-1999 ngisebenza saphela ngalokhu ngikhokha ka-Edgars. Manje nasebephinda manje balobe ngifonela nje bese basengithola umsebenzi. Kanti leso sikweletu asiphelanga yini kwaphela ngilokhu bathi umsebenzi uphelile mina.
Good question. Siyabonga kakhulu make kusishayela. Lindiwe ke ulapha eMlazi. Our guest will definitely tackle that question after the break. And maybe you are no longer liable for that debt. Mbukeli qaphela ke uma ke licala selibolile ungalivusi. Siyabuya khona nyalo Mbukeli. Ungayinzawo. Yilungelo lakho Welcome back, and still taking your calls and reading your Facebook messages. Please share your thoughts with us. Our number to dial is 011-714-9691. Let's now continue with our conversation here. Before we went to that ad break, Besnalindiwe ulapha emlazi. Yena-ke abetsi she had a debt since 1999, or she last had the debt in 1999, but then they called her years later. How would you advise her?
I hope ulindiwe zangasivumele sisikweletu. You know, like, oh yeah, bonyasikumbula. You know, those are the mistakes esizenzayo as consumers. But in the same breath, you know, National Credit Amendment Acts, ZT, debt collectors, credit providers, they are prohibited from collecting on iskoloto esidala, prescribed debt. So umthetho awubavumeli as it is ukuthi they should collect on old debt. So it's two-way, but I mean 99, that's a very long time.
Yeah. Now, in the case of Lindiwe, saying ngihlalele nje endlini, and I see, and both you will agree, if you see that dreaded number on my phone, that 087 number on my phone, what do I do? Advise me, what should I do? Should I tell the person to call me later as I consult with my legal team or whatever? What do I do?
It is very important for consumers. Kumele ba, you know, there are free legal services around. Ama law clinic akhona, ama legal aid South Africa akhona, ama offices around the country. Don't just sign something which you don't understand, and then at the end of the day, because what they will go with acknowledgement of that. It's what I assume they did to her. They'll go with acknowledgement of that. She will sign it, that she acknowledged to be owing that debt, and she will pay in this fashion. And then further, you know what they were doing before, but since the Constitutional Court had made that judgment, they were even doing consent to judgment and jurisdiction. So you may find that this happened. And I think she have to contact one of our offices, her office or my office, and then let's see how we can help her. I mean, from 1999.
And also, I think it's very important. Ama consumers mela kumbule. Every time utholi phone call from a debt collector, it's charged guwe.
Yeah.
Every time back conductor.
Well, I guess my question was, what do I do in that particular instance? Now, when what do I do? Do I refer them to my lawyers or what?
You inform them. If you don't have a lawyer, you inform them that I will make an informed decision after I have consulted with people who understand these processes.
Okay.
So you may call me after a week, you may call me after 2 weeks, then I'll give you a good answer from there. I don't want to commit myself to something which I don't understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Asesiye Natale Kakasini, Sina Njabulo from KZN. A very good afternoon to you. Sagomwela Njabulo.
Yebo njani bhuti wami?
Siyaphila kunjani baba?
Ngiyaphila bhuti wami.
Khuluma nathi baba.
Yes, ngifuna ukwazi ukuthi bekade ngisebenza then ngaba ne credit card. So I credit card yami ngagcina ngasakwazi ukuyikhokhela because ngayisebenzisa yonke I credit yayikhona. So umsebenzi osuyangiphelela. But the bank sebengifake kubameli, so they bayangifonela ngiyabaphendula. I once went to the bank and ngabatshela ngathi ke na angisasebenzi manje angazi ukuthi ngizokhokha kanjani. So inkinga yami lapho.
So wasivuma lesikweneti?
Sorry ma?
Wasivuma lesikweneti? Did you acknowledge that debt?
Yes, the first time ngiqeda nje ukuphelelwa umsebenzi, I went to the bank. I told them ukuthi ke na kuzoba akusezukuba lula for me ukuthi ngikhokhele isikweletu. So angisasebenzi ngiphelelwa umsebenzi. But besibona they gonna give me a period of 6 months. Then ukuze ngikwazi ukuthi ngibone ngihamba akukho lapho ngithola khona umsebenzi, then come back to them. Mhlambe ngikwazi ukuthi ngiphinde ngiqhubeke ngikhokhe.
Was that within the 3-year period?
Sorry?
Was that within the 3-year period? Noma bakasaphilile 3 years?
No, akapheli I-credit card ngiyenze last year, bengisasebenza ngayifisa nje last year because bekunezinto engizenze e-personal. So manje inkinga ngisasebenzi. So the immediate ngiphelelwa umsebenzi, I went to the bank. I told them ukuthi ke na angisasebenzi, I don't know what to do. But inkinga yami ukuthi sengifonelwa abameli babo, uyabona, ukuthi I must pay the debt. So I don't know ukuthi ngizoyenza njani because angisasebenzi. Yabo.
Okay.
okwesithu bhuti wami, I've got a problem. Before ngi-applyele this credit card from kule bank engisebenzisayo, I went to another indawo la kubolekisa khona ngemali, i-African Bank. So ngasayina khona everything, only to find ukuthi bagcina banganginikezanga imali leyo. Kodwa i-contract yabo ngase ngiyisayinile. Uma sengichecka i-credit score yami, it appears on my credit record that I'm owing African Bank imali engakaze ngiyisebenzise, imali engakaze ngize ngiyithole wakuyithola. So mina the only bank that I know ileli engisebenzayo uABSA leli ngibakholota khona imali. And uma bengifonela vele I don't need ukuthi ngibaleke for kulaba baba. I told them ukuthi I'm not working anymore. So iwari yami ukuthi ilezi sikweleti manje sesiqhamuke eceleni ke manje because I'm blacklisted. Angazi ukuthi ngizoqala kuphi ukuthi ngibakhokhele vele ngoba ngisasebenza.
Okay, njabule siyaba ukhulu kusishayela. Thina intetho ke titakusita kulelo hlangothi. Asesicela sidzingise ke indzaba enjabulo. Sidzingisa siyithini ke lenza?
All right. Unjabulo unalo ngizophendula i-question 2 kuqala. Unalo ilungelo lokuthi alodge dispute, right? Zikayi2 lezi zinto lezi. Une dispute no African Bank because i-loan lena ebekayicelile akayitholanga. Also i-credit profile yakhe is affected. Uyakhona ukuthi aye straight ku credit bureau. Athi ngiyadisputa le account history or payment profile on the basis that anginaso lesi sikweletu leso azange ngiyithola imali, right? So i-credit agreement azange ihambe according to the way ngoba ngiyahamba ngiya-applya, ngiyasayina, ngiyathola imali, ngiyaqala ukuthi ngiyakhokhela. So somewhere along the line azange agreement ihambe kanjalo. That's why sino ombudsman in the country, because uma kukuthi you are not winning no credit provider or ibank, you are not winning with a credit bureau, kulapho ama ombudsman come in ukuxazulula leyo nkinga leyo yalo contract naye leso sikweletu lesunaso. So uyaqala khona lapha nesikweletu khona, uyaqala khona lapha credit bureau la kulistwe khona. If after low 20 business days akatholi sizo or they are not happy with the outcome, uyakhona ukuthi acontact i-ombudsman for usizo ukuthi axazulule leyo nkinga leyo.
Okay.
I-question le yakhe yokuthi bamnikeze 6 months, right? Uthi ubachazela ukuthi angisebenzi, bamnikeze 6 months. Usually thina into si-advisayo ukuthi if kudlula 6 months awukakawuthola umsebenzi, yenza enye affidavit futhi ngoba i-process uma uphelelwe ngumsebenzi uyathatha i-retrenchment letter yakho uyokwenza affidavit, uhambe yesitolo noma umthengisi umbolekisi imali uthi angisasebenzi, nayi retrenchment letter yami, nayi affidavit. Uma sekudlula lo ya 6 months uyahamba uyokwenza enye affidavit futhi echaza ukuthi ngisafuna umsebenzi angakawutholi. You know, so communication is very important. That's why uthola ukuthi now abammeli sebakufonela, so uya blacklistwa manje ngoba bacama ukuthi so uyasibaleka lesi sikweletu.
All right, Tekani, your take?
Yeah, I think the process had been followed. For him, it's just to communicate and say, I'm not working. He's been given a chance of 6 months because he went to inform them. But it seems like he did not inform them about his employment status again after 6 months. So he have to keep them informed. But unfortunately now the matter is within the hands of the attorneys. And there, the attorneys have instruction to collect and the debt is due.
Okay. Asasibuka ke imilayeto yaka Facebook. Let's now take our Facebook messages while our team get it. Okay, there we go. Now, Kagiso Utsi, so how can you know if the debt is prescribed if under certain circumstances you change the contact details, okay? Mpilo Skosana Utsi kade ngisebenza emkhakheni we debt collection. Into engibonile ukuthi kudlalwa ngabantu. Uthola ukuthi kuqoqwa isikweletu nge-Excalibur system balance ithi negative. Kodwa umuntu kuthiwa akakhokhe. Imali abameli bayifaka kuma trust accounts bangabuyiselwa ima refund, okay? Samuel Utsi and hi, how do I know if the debts are forfeited? If it's older than 3 years and they contact me to pay, but I can't pay, what happens then?
Okay.
Right.
Question to Yoma debt collectors ngizomshiyela ukhali kwami. How do you know isikoloto has prescribed?
Yes.
If kukuthi wena uchange ama contact details, it's very tricky. ngoba somewhere somehow asazi ukuthi wachange nini, asazi ukuthi when did they stop collecting on the debt. So that one becomes very, very tricky to prove unless consumer mabemfonela bezama ukukoleka kulesi sikweletu athi cha, sorry, this debt is prescribed, and then a credit provider approve yena ukuthi no, but we contacted you within 3 years asakuthola kule ma contacts osiphe wona.
Okay.
Again, back to the point earlier, how do I know it has prescribed isikweletu? If after 3 years, right, of defaulting, not of having the account, but defaulting, so now uhlangane nenkinga awakhona ukuthi uyasikhokhela. Uma after that 3 years kuthe cwaka nje azange bakucontacte, you have not acknowledged the debt, you have not made payment to the debt, they have not taken legal actions against you, kudlule 3 years, the debt then prescribes.
All right, Tekani, I will engage you after the break, but for now, let's take a final commercial break. We'll be right back. Don't go away. We hope that as you're getting ready to bidding 2017 a farewell, you'll also be saying goodbye to old debts. Now, don't you make that mistake and let them follow you into the new year. Uma belqala libolile nje budlu. Asesiye eFree State kuna Pule. Sakumule Pule ehleleni sawubona?
Kitemuka.
Siyaphila kunjani mama?
Keteng. Papa mane ke na le bothata mane ka 2016 batho ba credit solutions ba kile ba mfounela.
Ah.
Ba ba mplela gore no ba tla nthusa go patala debt ya ka jwale ntate ntse ke sebetsa ene ne ke ntse ke patala hantle, so the problem ke mo I then fall for it, then ke no ha ke checka le di creditors tsa ka mo bankeng mane e hlaisa ke le under what we call this thing over indebted, but ntse ke patala hantle every month.
All right, Pule, thank you so much for your call. All right, how would you respond to Pule?
All right, when you go, it's what she's talking about is debt review. When you go under debt review, when you are assisted by a debt counselor to restructure your debt and to negotiate less payment terms, izovela ku credit profile yakho. There will be a flag that says this consumer is under debt review and therefore cannot enter into further credit agreements. Okay. So until as akhokhele aqeda ukukhokhela azathole a clearance certificate, leyo flag leyo izohlala ku credit profile yakhe aze aqeda ukukhokhela.
Okay.
And then only when the credit bureaus are given a clearance certificate, bazo clearisha the flag and the debt pertaining to whatever was put under the debt restructure.
Right.
Inkinga ukuthi sometimes ama consumer awa understand ukuthi uma ungena kule agreement ye debt restructure kuyahanjiwa kuye credit bureau kuchaza ukuthi consumer manje seka kule credit debt review, for example. Consumers just think ngizothola ibreaki and that's it. They don't understand that there are some processes and they do affect a credit profile yabo as well.
Okay, Dekan, let me again engage you on the previous Facebook messages that have been coming through. I hope our team will get them up so we could delve deeper into them. Okay, but while our team is still getting them ready, okay, there we go. Now, Kagiso Motlasedi, so how can you know if the debt is prescribed if under certain circumstances you change your contact details? And in Piros Kosana, utsina gating sebenza emkhakheni with debt collection. Into engibonile ukuthi kudlala ngabantu. Uthola ukuthi kuqoqwa isikweletu nge-Excalibur system balance ithi ke yona negative kodwa umuntu kuthiwa akakhokhe. Imali abameli bayifaka kuma trust accounts bangabuyiselwa ama refunds. Dekani. Ngathi tlima ngakakho lapho ngabe.
Yes, in terms of the law, any debt collector when they attain should have a trust account. The trust account is where you receive the money paid on behalf of the other parties, meaning that if you're a debtor and you're paying to the attainer or a debt collector, you pay to the trust account. That money should be paid to the credit or service provider within a reasonable period. And then if that trust account accrues interest, the interests are due in terms of Debt Collectors Act. They must come to the council. So ourselves, the Council for Debt Collectors, we don't want to see any interest coming from the trust account, because it means that you are keeping money in the trust account and you are not paying it over. And then in terms of this message, if a person happened that they were keeping money, because I see he or she says was a former debt collector. If that was happening, in terms of the law, you have to give the statement out to the debtor, free of charge in 6 months. It has to be given to the debtor to see the breakdown of the account, how you have paid, what were the costs. So if that was happening, that was wrong. So that person must make a formal complaint.
Okay. Now, with the festive season, just how prevalent are we? How prevalent are cases wherein bantu balandzelwa, debt collectors in terms of their old debts?
Siyubona kakhulu ama cases angenayo ku credit ombud. Umuntu azo sekulate ukuthi actually this debt is prescribed. Angithi isikhathi sama bonus. And abantu bathola ucingo luthi uyasikhumbula isikweletu sendawo ethize, we are giving you a discount mhlambe ka 50% or ka 70%, khokhela nje wena or usingaqala arrangement. Ama consumers amaningi uthola ukuthi banemali at this time, so it's easy for them to fall player trap ethi sikunikeza u discount. Meanwhile, you are not even liable for that debt. So we get a lot of those situations, especially ngalesi sikhathi lesi esithi uyasikhumbula lesi sikweletu, yebo ngiyasikhumbula, bhatala nje, khokhela nje u 30% waso, and then sibe sesiqedile, uconsume uyagijima uyakhokhela.
All right, now as a parting shot, Tikane, how do consumers protect themselves?
Consumer, at the stage we are living in now, they have access to many things via internet. I will suggest that they check what are their rights when it comes to debt collection, what are their rights when it comes to prescribed debts. There are lots of writings online. If they find it that they don't understand, our offices are open. Free of charge, we can assist them with our opinion.
Okay. Now, as a parting shot, how would you advise viewers and consumers alike?
It's important a consumer yonke into ongena kuyo understand. Understand what the credit agreement means. And if you don't understand, contact our offices. Complain. Abantu baseMzansi Afrika ba complain. Bahlala nenkinga athi kungendlela kungakhona. Lodge a complaint. Even if it comes back to say, no, you are in the wrong, at least lodge a complaint so that you know for sure that you were not done under.
All right. Thanks to you two for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so
pleasure.
much.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope 2018 will be a debt-free year for all of you out there. Thank you also to our guests for their valuable insights. Remember, a debt is prescribed if during the past 3 years the consumer did not at all admit to owing on the debt, did not make payments towards the outstanding amount, and the lender has not taken legal action against the consumer. This was our very last live show for the year 2017, but you can still catch our pre-recorded shows from next week from 12 p.m. right here on SABC 1 Mzansi for sure. You can also catch our repeats on Thursdays from 10 p.m. From me, Simphiwe Ngone, and the rest of the team, happy prescribed debts, happy debt-free 2018. Goodbye from Johannesburg.